Today's lesson is our first introduction to the source engine's particle emitters or particle system. And a particle in a game engine is a way for us to render or show kind of, I think they describe them sometimes as like fluffy or chaotic objects that are kind of hard to render using normal traditional like solid rendering techniques, because a puff of smoke is not a solid block or a solid brush or anything like that we can render and manipulate. So a particle emitter is a tool that creates a whole bunch of small little tiny pictures or sprites or even little tiny models, and it emits them to create things like flowing hair, smoke, fire, clouds, explosions, those kind of things. And it can be done with simple two-dimensional sprites. It can be done with little tiny 3D pieces. It kind of just depends on the emitter and the particle system that the particular engine is using. So in this one, the fire has a particle emitter that creates a chaotic fire system that we just drop it in and it creates fire. And there's a lot of options to play around with it, but we're going to start by just building a fire, and then I'm going to have you put one into your final project, a little campfire. So any map you want, you can just put this on your main map if you want. So I've got a few different particle emitters here. They're all the same. I've just played around with the size on them a little bit, and let me show you what they look like. Alright, so here's the fire, and it looks pretty good. It's not the best fire I've ever seen, but considering that you're talking a 10-year-old engine, this is actually pretty good. So it's got built-in smoke, which is nice. They do damage if the player walks over them, and they can even ignite other particles. So it's kind of cool. So let's look at them. They're really simple to use. The entity is called ENV Fire. This is the name of it right here. So to put in the fire, you're going to go to your entity tool, click here. You're going to come over to the other side under entities, objects, and we will type in ENV_fire. And then let's go ahead and drop this one over here. All right. So for today's lesson, we're going to do a fire that's already on and it stays on, continues to burn. So we have a couple of flags we need to set on it, because otherwise the fires by default will burn themselves out. And oftentimes you'll put in a fire, and by the time the player gets there, the fire will already be out. So we're going to take this fire entity that we just put in. I want you to open it up. So we're going to take our selection tool, double click on the fire. Here's our options. We don't need to name it because we're not going to call this fire. We can ignite fires if we wanted to. We would need to name them if we did that, if we had like a fire on, fire off type input output on it. But in this case, we're not going to, this fire is just going to be burning. We're just making a little campfire for our for the final. Start disabled, no. Duration, so this is how long the fire will burn. And you notice it's 30 seconds. Fires burn out really quick. So there's a flag that we'll check that will keep the fire going forever. The size is 64. So the fires that I had in the other map when I ran the map were a 64, a 32, and then I think a 16. So you can kind of play around with the size to get a campfire look for the final. I'm going to do this one at like a 20. Alright, attack. So this is the amount of time the fire takes to grow to its full strength. And again, there's a flag that we're going to set that will ignore this setting. The fire will just be on the entire time. There's two different types of fire. There's a natural and a plasma, but we're going to stick with natural. The ignition point is if we had this fire off, but say we wanted the player to burn something with a torch or something like that. This is how much fire damage or heat damage this would take before it would ignite. So for today, we're not going to use it. We'll play around with this stuff when we start getting into the input-output, like relays and stuff like that. But right now, we're just going to make a fire that's burning continuously. So let's go to our flags. And here's a bunch of options that you should get fairly familiar with on the fire. So infinite duration, this means exactly that. This fire will burn forever. Smokeless will get rid of the smoke particle emitter. We are going to start on, and we are going to start full. So that means that as soon as the game loads, this fire is going to be on, and it's also going to be at its full maximum size. Don't drop means it's not going to be affected by gravity, and then we're going to go down here, visible from above. So this is a particle effect, and some particles, if you've ever seen them in games, sometimes if you look at them from different angles, they can kind of go invisible because sometimes they're made out of two-dimensional sprites. So this option just guarantees that no matter what angle we're looking at this fire, we'll be able to see it. So infinite duration, start on, start full, don't drop, visible from above. These are the settings I put on almost every fire I put in a game that I want to be burning as sort of like part of the environment. I'm going to click apply, close this, and that's it. That is how we put in a simple burning fire. So if I click OK here, go ahead and compile this. And we're waiting for the game to come up. Here it is. And still waiting. There we go. Okay, fire everywhere. And there's the new one right there. Okay, so size-wise, all the way on the left is a 64, then we have a 32, then the next one is actually two 16s right next to each other. One of them ignited the other one. I was playing around before class. And then all the way over on the right is the new one we created that's a size 20. So you can play around with the size to kind of just see what they look like. But that is your infinite duration, always on, full power, fire damage, smoke creating, and you'll be adding one of these to your final. On the final, I'm going to want you to add to this several lights. I would use at least 2 lights with different appearance options. You know, maybe like an orange and a yellow, or a couple of different oranges that are slightly different from each other, but flickering to create realistic light to go with the fire, because this fire glows, which means in darkness you would be able to see the fire, but it doesn't actually emit light into the world. So so it's kind of weird. Like if you were in a dark hallway, you would be able to see the fire, but the fire would not illuminate the area around it, which is unrealistic. So we have to add our own light entities to this. So what I'd like you to play around with today, because this will be on the final, is we're going to make a little campfire for our map on the final, and we're going to add to this, you know, 2 or 3 lights that have different flicker patterns and different colors to simulate kind of the chaotic lighting effect that's created by a fire, the flickering and the way it gets brighter and darker, and you've got yellows and oranges that are kind of bright and dim and flickering, and that kind of pulsating light that a fire creates. So your assignment today is to work on that, and then if you've come up with something you like, remember the final is open book, open notes, so you'll be able to take whatever you find today and you can use it directly on the final if you can work out a really nice, pretty fire effect for me. Alright, so that is your intro to the ENV fire entity.